So we built our first module where we declare all the components that need to work together. Now, as you're building more complex Angular applications, it is pretty common that if you're using Angular modules, that you want to break up your application into multiple modules, which are then merged together again. For example, we could put all those task-related components into a separate module. But I'll actually start with the card component, because that card component is in the end shared across different features of our application, you could say. It's being used by the tasks and by the user list. And it would be quite common, if you're working with modules, to put such shared components into its own module. And therefore, what you could do here is create a shared module in that shared folder. So next to the card folder, I have that shared module. And here we would then export another class called shared module, which is decorated with the ng module decorator, just as the root app module was, because this is also just another module. The only difference here now is that we won't have a bootstrap configuration here, because we only have that in the root module of the application. So in the module that's being passed here to bootstrap module. All other modules don't have such a bootstrap array, but they will have a declarations array. And therefore here in this shared module, we would add a declarations array, and then here to this list add the card component, and only that component in our case. Because that component then doesn't use any other components inside of its template. So we don't have to do anything else here. And the idea now would be to add all shared components that we eventually might have in our application. If we would add more, we would all add them here to this module, so that if we had more shared components than just the card component, we would all add them here. And then we would add another key here to this configuration, the exports key, where we define all the modules that are not just needed internally for those modules that are declared here, but that should then also be made available to any other module that potentially imports the shared module. Because my plan now indeed is to go to the app module and remove the declaration of the card component here, and also remove this import here. And instead, I want to add my shared module here to the imports array. So we also must import the shared module from its file and then add it here to the imports array. And that would now merge the components made available by that module into this declarations array behind the scenes, you could say, kind of. However, it will only merge any components that are specified in the exports array here. And therefore, if I want to make the card component available to all components that are declared in the app module, where I'm importing the shared module, then I have to add this card component also to this exports array, so that I'm declaring it and I'm then telling Angular that it should be available to any other modules that use the shared module. And with that, the application again would work as before without errors, but now we added another custom module. And we don't have to stop there. We can now also go to the tasks folder here for practice purposes and add a tasks module. So a tasks module file, and then in that tasks module file, we export a tasks module class, which is decorated with ng module. And here we now declare all the components that make up our tasks feature. So all the task related components that need to work together. Now for that, I'll go to the app module, and here it's essentially the tasks component, the task component, and the new task component, and the card component, which is used by the task component. Here, I'm using the card. So we'll also need to make sure that that's then available to those components. But I'll start by migrating the components, hence I'll cut them from here, from the declarations array in the app module. And we can now remove these unused imports and instead add them to the tasks module declarations array. However, we now also need to add their imports, and I'll let my IDE do that real quick here, like this. And with that, they would be able to work together again. However, they would neither be available to the app module, nor would they know about the card component. Now I'll start by making them available to the app module by adding them to my exports. And here we actually don't have to add all of them. Instead, we only have to add all the components that are being used by other components defined in the importing module. So in the app module in this case. And if we take a closer look at this module, we see that the user component does not use any tasks components. Neither does the header component. And the app component only in its template uses the tasks component. So that's therefore also the only component that must be made available by the tasks module. So it's only the tasks component that must be exported. We still need to declare all components here because they are working with each other. The tasks component is, after all, using the new task component and the task component. So they must all be declared, but we only need to export the tasks component. And with that, we can go to the app module again, and now not just register the shared module here, but also the tasks module. And that then makes the exported tasks component available to the app component again. Nonetheless, now we would actually face a problem here. You see, for example, the tasks are not showing up, and I'm getting an error here in my developer tools that the date pipe could not be found. And we're getting this problem because that date pipe is being used by one of my task-related components, by the task component. And it's not just the date pipe, it's also that card component. Now, you could say both things are made available by the app module. The browser module makes the date pipe available, and the shared module makes the card component available. And that would be true. But those things are only made available to the module into which you're importing them. So the card module is made available to all these components, and so is the date pipe, but not to any components that might be defined by any other imported module. So the tasks module does not know anything about the date pipe or the card component. Now to fix this, we have to add the imports array to that tasks module, because as a simple rule, every module must work on its own. So if a module needs something, it must declare or import it itself. It can't get it from any parent module that might be using this module. So if we want to get access to the card component, we have to import the shared module here in the tasks module as well, just as we do it in the app module. If we want to get access to the date pipe, we also need to import that. We could now import it standalone like this. Instead, what you would do here is you would import another module provided by Angular. Now you could think that it's the browser module because that is what we imported before, but that would be wrong because the browser module is a special module that's only meant to be imported into the root module with which you bootstrap the application. For all other modules that need access to such common features like the date pipe, there is another module provided by Angular, the common module, which is imported from @Angular common like this. In addition, we also need to import the forms module here because the new task component is using features from that module. It is using this ng-submit event, for example, and the ng-model directive, which are both provided by this forms module. So that must be added here to the imports array of this tasks module as well. And with that, we can then actually also go to the app module and remove the forms module there, not the browser module, that's still required for this general setup, but the forms module can be removed because now no component of those components is using anything from that module. So that can be removed, and so can be the unused import. And with that, we're back to the working app we had before. But now we're also using multiple nested modules, if you want to call them like this. And whilst splitting this app up into modules like this is definitely overkill because it was only a basic app, it does show you how to work with modules, which is important to know because you might encounter module-based applications as you're working as an Angular developer, or you might simply prefer modules over standalone components, which of course also is fine.